Okay, let's react to the first two episodes of The Last Dance and all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on step milk. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, we just watched episodes number 1 and number 2 of The Last Dance, which chronicles the 97-98 season of the Chicago Bulls. And if you have not seen it, stop right now, pause, whatever you got to do, go watch those because spoilers. So we get to see not just Michael Jordan, but Michael Jordan as many people have told us. Like, the closest we got to something like this was Sam Smith's The Jordan Rules. And I'm going to read The Second Coming before this is over and done. But I think this is all really fascinating. I agree with a lot of people that it's been a lot of fun to watch, right? Because you're getting inside the politics of what the 97-98 Bulls were. And we can see that this all really comes back to Jerry Krause. Whether Jerry Krause is a scapegoat for Jerry Reinsdorf, who doesn't really want to have these discussions about his players or he really want to give them any kind of contract. The man said on record, when you sign your contract, I don't want you coming back to me saying renegotiate. Even though you might outperform your contract by leaps and bounds. As many people would tell you in this documentary, Scottie Pippen was the second best player in the NBA. Not just on the Chicago Bulls, in the NBA. And somehow signed a 7-year, $18 million contract that everybody believes was one of the worst in the NBA. As you saw, he was the 122nd highest paid player in the league. That ain't got more than 300 dudes in it, right? So there's that. But there's also this bit where Jerry Krause does not seem to be able to get out of his own way and is also the butt of jokes from not just Jordan, but Pippen. And when you take into account that Pippen had a hard time just stringing 3 words together in front of, Bill Clinton when he was down at UCA, for him to be able to give Brody and talk about Jerry Krause shows what kind of growth he had, but also how he's feeling himself and how he wanted to be treated. Now, I understand that nobody wants to be traded. Nobody wants to feel like they're expendable. And this thing between labor and ownership or labor and management is always going to be fraught because you're going to have this thing where you believe that the players are most important and management's not always going to agree with that, right? They're going to say, hey, I can get anybody to do this job. The thing about this that I think is going to get lost, though, is Jerry Krause is really good at his job, but he was so good at his job that he thought his job was more important than the job of the players. Because after all, he basically put that team together outside of everybody but Michael Jordan. Jerry Krause brings in Phil Jackson, perhaps one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest NBA coach of all time, right? You can throw Red Auerbach in there. You could probably throw Greg Popovich in there if you want to, right? And then the list gets a little bit shorter. Maybe you want to throw Pat Riley in there. But it's a very short list. Brings in Tex Winter to run the triangle, which is the offense that the Bulls become synonymous with. And the reason that it works so well is because of Jordan and Pippen, right? Pippen, for which Jerry Krause scouted, grinded film for, went and found in the age of no internet. Finds this guy at an NAIA level. Nobody knows who he is when he gets drafted. David Stern even calls him Scott Pippen. That's how out of the loop he is on it. And then is able to fleece the Seattle Supersonics into trading basically the second best player of the 90s, right? And then you're able to build other pieces around while also pissing Jordan off in the process. You trade Charles Oakley away, you bring in Bill Cartwright. Was the move because they end up winning championships. And by the way, 3 of them with Cartwright and then Winnington along the way and Luke Longley and so forth, so on. But also, Jerry Krause really wanted a guy like Tony Kukoc, who would become the 3rd best player on that team. And I get that a lot of people think that Steve Kerr is 3rd best player on that team. And I can understand why you might think that. If you go back and look, you can see the Croat was the dude that was actually really great. But Tony Kukoc was already on Jerry Krause's radar in the 80s, let alone the early 90s. And we know this because Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen made a point to go after Tony Kukoc in the 1992 Olympic Games. Matter of fact, when they played him, they didn't want anybody to score, let alone Tony Kukoc, and they want to do all the scoring because Michael Jordan had realized early on that he needed Scottie Pippen to win championships. And he even said so in this documentary, and I want to give him props for that, for saying, look, whenever my name is mentioned, you need to be able to mention Scottie Pippen as well because Scottie was the best two-way player not named Michael Jordan in the NBA. And more than that, he wanted to play defense, right? Rex Chapman tells stories about wanting to play against Michael Jordan in the NBA because Rex Chapman's game was built on coming off screens. And what did Michael Jordan not want to do? Chase you all around screens. Scottie put the shackles on you wherever he was, right? And kept his guard skills. Matter of fact, in hearing all of these things with Scottie Pippen and his growth spurt and his ability to keep his guard skills, you know who I hear? I hear Anthony Davis, right? A guy who had a huge growth spurt, who kept his ability to handle the ball, run the floor, and play tremendous defense. Now, Anthony Davis gets to be about 7 feet. Of course, Scottie stops at about 6'7", but you could see how he is the precursor to what you know as Paul George, and even to a degree, LeBron James. And I get that we're going to talk about him as we compare it to Michael Jordan, and I really want to unpack that later on, but I want to stick with what we're watching right now, which is Jerry Krause being at the center of all of this, right? I think that many people are right in their assessments of Krause. You didn't necessarily like the dude, and he probably got into it in his own way more often than he should have because his ego was so fragile and because he was so sensitive to how people within that organization would view him or view his role, right? And I get that some of us believe that players are, indispensable. Some of us believe that they are expendable. And depending on how you're raised and what jobs you maintain in life, you're probably going to come down on one side or the other. But what we can 100% agree on is without Jerry Krause, Michael Jordan does not really have a team to go win championships with. But without Michael Jordan, Jerry Krause can't put together a doggone thing that would be able to compete with a Michael Jordan team that was even having a competent general manager. And I think you cannot discount that Jerry Krause had 2 Executive of the Year awards to go wrong with those 6 rings, right? But you would also say, who wouldn't have been able to do it with Michael Jordan? Well, Rod Thorne wasn't able to do it with Michael Jordan. Doug Collins wasn't able to do it with Michael Jordan. It took this group of people to come together in this way for this to happen. Now, that said, I think the 7 minutes or less bit of this is fascinating because at a time when we're in load management and we say things like, hey, sit that dude out, get the lottery pick, you saw Michael Jordan wants to win, also wanted to keep his word. I was going through this with Oklahoma City Thunder, right? That's my squad. So knowing that people were saying, hey, just this season's a wash, I wasn't willing to take that. And I would say that on my radio show, the RJ Young Show, 9 to 11 on Sports Animal, I didn't want to root for a team that was tanking. This ain't the 76ers, right? I never believed in that. I don't care who you are. I want to see the best players play, and I want to see them go for W's. And Chris Paul did want to do that as well. And then you're talking about an OKC team that was not just going to make the playoffs, but had an opportunity to make some noise in the playoff in a year where you lost Russell Westbrook and Paul George, right? Where your best player is Chris Paul. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is coming in onto his own. You're seeing Dennis Schroeder become one of the best advanced statistical players in the NBA, mostly because they just refused not to throw in the towel. So the idea that you would limit Michael Jordan to 7 minutes per half and 14 minutes of the game only makes sense when you know you're trying to protect the long-term investment. And while you might be angling for those lottery picks that would also give you better teammates for Michael Jordan, and you would think, hey, Mike, don't you want to win championships? Mike was also very much about Mike and Mike keeping his word, right? This is a guy who had once come up to Phil Jackson and said, hey, I need you to play less minutes so we can win an NBA title. Since I play less minutes, I'm not going to win the scoring title. He says, yeah, but we're trying to win the NBA title, not scoring title. Michael Jordan gets lathered up 2 hours for shoot around, goes through shoot around, puts up 30 in the first half, says, now you can sit me. Because Mike was very, very individualistic about this thing, and he wanted his will to be done. I think there's a lot of bullying, Mike, and I think that's coming out. But again, if you are the greatest of all time, people are willing to give you that leeway. I'm not, because I believe that there's one thing between being the greatest of all time and being a bully, and there's something else entirely about being the greatest of all time and being kind and being reverent and also walking your walk. Muhammad Ali gets the full dose. Floyd Mayweather Jr., Michael Jordan, not so much, right? But that's another discussion altogether. The other part about this that I found really interesting that we haven't really gotten into, and I suspect we're going to get into, is not just Phil Jackson's relationship with Jerry Krause, but the way that Phil Jackson was able to keep a lid on a lot of what was going on with that team, because you can really see from Phil Jackson and say like Doug Collins, there's a difference between being able to be the head coach of a bunch of egos and the greatest players on the planet than there is just coaching basketball. Steve Kerr, I think, was remarkably good with this with Golden State and has been because of his experiences with the Chicago Bulls, and I think he would be the first person to tell you that. Putting Greg Popovich in charge of that same Bulls team probably don't get the same results because it ain't the same kind of egocentric team, right? Bill Whittington had to have some stuff in his neck, had to be able to fight people off. We'll hear stories about Will Perdue, who Mike called Will Vanderbilt. You're also going to get into this real deep aspect of Michael Jordan's game where the game of basketball, which he always refers to it in those 3 words, which I don't understand, was the most important thing to him, but also something he could just do. So the idea that he would play golf with Danny Ainge before a pivotal game in the playoffs doesn't really wash until you know what's going on with Michael Jordan, which is, hey, I'm just that good. I can do this. He did it again in the 92 Olympics, the day of the gold medal match, right? For the gold. He played 18 rounds of golf. He played tonk until 5 in the morning, got 25 minutes of rest, not even sleep, took a shower, and then went out and won the gold medal because he's Michael Jordan and he could just do that. But it also shines a light on this fraternization of NBA players in the 80s and 90s because so many NBA players be like, hey, why y'all friends here in the aughts? Why y'all friends in the 21st century? Why y'all fraternized together? I wanted to cut Michael Jordan's throat out. I wanted to kneecap Larry Bird. Then what the hell is Michael Jordan doing playing golf with Danny friggin' Ainge before a playoff game? I think it's a sham. But more than that, you're seeing the same things play out, right? You're seeing general managers believe that they are a bit more important or that the organization, to use Jerry Krause's term, is more important than any one player. Problem is, you're correct, except if you're talking about maybe 3 players in the NBA all time, right? One of those is Michael Jordan. One of those is LeBron James. The other one's probably Magic Johnson, right? Larry Bird, I think, is the one dude for which you could probably throw into any situation in any era and it would work because of his personality and his game, right? We could also talk about the physicality of the 90s. We could also talk about the expansion leagues in the 90s. We could also talk about Michael Jordan having the opportunity to take 18 months off, and play 13 years, and people forgive him for that because we didn't have the internet. And I think that's a part of this that I really want to see play out. But I did appreciate the 90s undertones. I did appreciate the 90s hip-hop undertones. And I did appreciate that we got to see Michael Jordan having his will done and entering this realm where he understood who he was, as he said when he won the 1982 national championship over Patrick Ewing's Georgetown, which would become a recurring theme for Patrick Ewing. Yikes. Lots of good stuff in this. I'm curious about what you think of this show. Tell me in the comments below. All right, deuces.